Hey, it's me, Nalthazar, and welcome to another Magic the Gathering Puzzle Quest video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over a brand new mono-red Planeswalker that has entered the vault in Puzzle Quest, Lukka, Wayward Bonder. So, let's get into it. To get this started, I want to give a quick thank you to Octagon. Octagon sent me this Planeswalker so that I could go ahead and try it out and make this video for you all. So I really appreciate your guys' continued support, and thank you very much. I also want to give a quick shout out and congratulations to Gauzmaster. Gauze was also sent Lukka Wayward Bonder to make a video on, so if you haven't yet had the opportunity to check out Gauze's video, Gauze also made a video on Lukka Wayward Bonder. I will have a link to that video in the description, but you should definitely go ahead and check it out if you want to see some more content on this brand new Planeswalker. Now, Lukka. This is going to be our second Lukka. We've already got one Lukka in the game in Puzzle Quest. This is Lukka number 2. Now, Lukka Wayward Bonder has 123 health at level 60. His mana bonuses are going to be +6 to red with +3 to both black and white, a neutral mana gain to green, and a -3 to blue. The 3 abilities all have fairly low loyalty costs, and they are Bonder's Tactics, Ozolith's Influence, and Crafty Companion. The first of those abilities, Bonder's Tactics, is going to cost 6 loyalty, and to use this ability, you must discard a card, then you draw 2 cards. If the last card in your graveyard is a creature card, you're going to draw 3 cards instead. Then all creatures in your hand get +2/+2. What this basically means is that you discard a card to draw 2, or you may discard a creature to draw 3, right? Because in order for that last card to be in your graveyard and have it be a creature, the card you discard needs to be a creature. The second ability, Ozolith's Influence, is going to only cost 9 loyalty, which is very low for a second loyalty ability on a Planeswalker. This one is going to have you pick one of the first 4 different creature cards from your graveyard. Return it to the battlefield under your control with its reinforcements. That creature gains haste, berserker, and trample, then exile it at the beginning of your next turn. Now, something really important to keep in mind about Ozolith's Influence is that Ozolith's Influence says that you're going to return the creature to the battlefield with its reinforcements. However, in my testing, it does not return the creature to the battlefield with its reinforcements. It just returns the creature. Now, Nicole Bolas, the Ravager, has an ability like this on the flip side, and the flip side does basically the same thing where you're going to return a creature to the battlefield with its reinforcements, but it also doesn't bring things back with their reinforcements. There's also a mythic from Kaldheim that I believe is called Haunted Voyage, and if you foretell Haunted Voyage, then it comes and it's going to cast and it's going to return all the different creatures, or it's going to return all of your creatures with their reinforcements to the graveyard from the battlefield. However, it also doesn't do that. So there seems to be something with the code that makes it so that if there's an effect that's going to return something to the battlefield with its reinforcements, it just returns it to the battlefield. So keep in mind, if you get this Planeswalker, when you use that second ability, you're not going to get things back with all of their reinforcements. You're just going to get one copy of it. And also, another weird thing about abilities like this is this one has that then exile it at the beginning of your next turn. However, that part of the ability actually will not always exile the creature. So if you already happen to have a copy of the creature that you bring back from the graveyard on the battlefield, then that creature that you bring back will actually just count as a reinforcement to that creature, and it will not exile at the beginning of your next turn. So you will not actually lose the stacks of that creature. So Ozolith's Influence is going to be best used by selecting a creature that you already have on the battlefield, and then you just get a permanent reinforcement to that creature, rather than having to exile it at the beginning of your next turn. The third ability, Crafty Companion, is going to create a card named Mila, Crafty Companion, in your hand. Now, it will be doing that at all level up ranks for Lukka Wayward Bonder. So regardless of what level Lukka is, if you've unlocked Crafty Companion, it will be giving you this Mila Crafty Companion in your hand. This is a support. It's a legendary. I don't know why I called it that. It's a mythic support. and it is going to have Invoke. So if you invoke it, you may instead have the Lukka Wayward Bonder Vanguard enter your hand. And the Mila support is going to make it so that when the first opposing creature attacks, that creature gets -2/-0 and gains Berserker until end of turn. So if you've got creatures out, it's going to be hitting your creatures, and for less power than it normally has. When a non-token creature you control becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls, draw a card and give it half mana. Finally, if not invoked, which it will not be if you have Mila, then when an opposing creature deals damage to a creature you control, disable that opposing creature for 2 turns. So basically, the opposing creature, the first opposing creature is going to attack. It's going to get -2/-0 and Berserker. It's going to potentially hit your creature, and then if it hits your creature, then it's going to have dealt damage to a creature. So it's then going to get disabled for that turn and your next turn, and then be able to attack again on its next turn, right? So disabled for the turn it attacks, disabled for your next turn, and then is re-enabled on their turn again. So just keep all of those things in mind as you think about the rest of the abilities. So you're going to create the card named Mila Crafty Companion, or you can choose to invoke for Lukka Wayward Bonder. And then you're going to deal X damage to your opponent's Planeswalker, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard and in your exile. Now, I've actually tried to make a bunch of decks around this ability where I dump a bunch of creatures into my graveyard and or my exile, and the maximum damage that I ever did with this ability was 7. Now, keep in mind that at rank 2, this ability deals just a guaranteed 8 damage. So at rank 2, which you will unlock by the time you get Lukka to level 30, it's going to make it so that you create the Mila Crafty Companion, and then you just do 8 damage to your opponent's face, which is, interestingly, better than I've been able to accomplish by using this walker. Now, there are a number of ways that I could play to try and get more things into my graveyard and exile, but just by playing a deck that was based around discard and naturally put a lot of things in the graveyard, the maximum number of creatures I had in there between the graveyard and exile was 7. So you're really not going to probably do that much damage by using the third ability. Now, I will say that something that I really like about the general design of this Planeswalker is that all 3 of the abilities synergize very well together. So the first ability, Bonder's Tactics, is going to let you start dumping things in your graveyard, and it's going to give you card advantage. You're going to draw some cards. And then by dumping things in the graveyard, that's going to give you things that you can potentially take back using Ozolith's Influence. Because if you just use the creatures as your discard outlets for Bonder's Tactics, you can then bring them back with Ozolith's Influence. Furthermore, if you decide to use the third ability and have that Crafty Companion come out and have the Mila token come down, or the Mila support come down, if you will, then it's going to make it so that your opponent's creatures are attacking your creatures. And if your opponent's creatures are attacking your creatures, then your creatures are probably going to die, which means that you can then use that second ability, Ozolith's Influence, and bring them back. So all 3 of the abilities go together very nicely, which means that you can very comfortably use all 3 of them in a lot of different situations. Now, I want to do something that I haven't done in one of these Planeswalker videos lately, and what I want to do is I want to take a few minutes to go over what are the different ways that I think you can reasonably build around this Planeswalker. So the first thing that came to my mind when I wanted to build around this Planeswalker was that this Planeswalker has a lot of abilities that center around discarding and the graveyard. And so if you take a look at a lot of the Lorehold cards, the Lorehold cards are the white... Lorehold is the white-red school from Strixhaven. And so if we take a look at a lot of the Lorehold cards, a lot of the Lorehold cards have different abilities attached to them that are going to be based on the graveyard, loosely, roughly on the graveyard and on exile. And so you can actually go ahead and make some really fun synergistic decks using commons, uncommons, and a few rares from the Lorehold Guild and make yourself a pretty cool deck. What I mean by that are cards like Lorehold Excavation, which is going to destroy the top card of your library every turn, and when you activate loyalty abilities, exiles creatures from your graveyard to give you spirit tokens. This is going to dump things in your graveyard. If it's going to exile something, it's going to exile a creature. This enables Lukka's third ability, which is pretty cool. If we were to go even further, there are things like the Venerable Warsinger, which is going to be able to bring creatures back from the graveyard. And so you can use Lukka's first ability to dump creatures in the graveyard and then have the Venerable Warsinger start to bring those back if you're running low enough creatures, or if you're able to buff up the Warsinger a little bit. We've also got things like the Radiant Scroll Wielder. This one is going to make it so that the first card in your graveyard without buried is going to gain flashback and buried. So it's going to be able to come back. So you can start discarding cards with Lukka's first, and then you can have the Scroll Wielder start bringing things back. Furthermore, we've got things like the Ardent Dustspeaker, which when it attacks, you get to start picking cards from your graveyard and giving them mana. You then also get to exile the other, so you could just choose to bring back a bunch of spells or supports, exile your creatures, get more mileage out of Lukka's third. You could go with a route sort of like Illuminate History, which is going to serve as a pseudo wheel effect, where you're going to discard cards from your hand, bring them, draw new cards, and then you're going to be able to create these spirit tokens based on the number of times the card was enhanced. The spirit tokens, if you're wondering, are these 3/2 tokens with Defender, which are actually pretty decent when you're able to make a lot of them. So there are really a lot of cards that you can use that are going to be pulling off of the graveyard and that you're going to be able to bring things back and do cool things with. My very favorite card to pair with this Planeswalker happens to be Efreet Flame Painter, because this one is going to be able to bring back spells for free, and then it's going to be bringing back up to 2 spells for free, and then you're just going to be able to cast them over and over again, and then you just do such absolutely terrible things to your opponent. And you can even use the first ability to get rid of this from your hand, and then use your second ability to bring this back to get free spells back. So there's just a lot of flexibility with the Efreet Flame Painter. So that is option number 1, is you can go with a relatively simple deck that uses some of the Lorehold cards with the graveyard mechanic. Option number 2 that I would suggest for standard, and you'll see that I'm just selecting the standard sets over here, is you can actually go with a general sort of exile build, right? So you can try and exile a bunch of things from your graveyard. The real problem with exiling things from your graveyard is that we just don't have a lot of very reliable things to do this with. So just trying to dump and exile things from the graveyard, right? You can use Immersturm Predator, which is going to enable you to exile critters from your graveyard, make it more powerful, and then you're also going to be enhancing Lukka's third ability by doing so. We can also use other things like Tectonic Giant. The Tectonic Giant is a mythic, and here's the thing about the Exile route. The Exile route is very heavily laden in mythic cards. So this one here is a giant, and then every time it attacks, you get to pick one of the first 2 cards from your library, fetch it, and exile the other. So the general idea is you're getting card advantage, you're throwing things into exile, and you're hopefully going to be making it so that you can use that third ability to do some pretty big harm to your opponent. We've also got things like Paco, Arcane Retriever, where every time it attacks, it's going to exile the top card of each player's library. And then the combo that I actually wound up having the most fun with this was the combination of using Fireflux Squad, which is going to enable you to exile a creature to fetch the next creature from your library and bring it down, along with Xenagos the Reveler, because Xenagos's 0 ability is going to be able to create Satyr tokens, and so by creating those tokens, you can use the Fireflux Squad to get rid of those tokens to get other creatures and enhance your battlefield. Now you might be like, dude, there's totally better token generators than Xenagos. But the thing about Xenagos is Xenagos actually gives us the biggest sort of boom exile way that Red has access to by exiling the top 7 cards of your library if you're able to get 2 Xenagoses down. Alternatively, you could actually use the +1 ability to convert some gems, and in converting the gems, maybe you'll get some mana, you'll increase the shield count, you'll increase the loyalty, and then you'll be able to use that -6. But I mostly had a lot of fun creating the Satyr tokens, whatever it is, with the Fireflux Squad. So you can go for that sort of exile route, right? The final route that you can go for this Planeswalker, I feel like, is the discard route, right? Where you're either going with discard or graveyard effects. Now, we happen to have a lot of very powerful discard effects in Red right now. And so you're able to do some pretty crazy things using this Planeswalker with the discard outlets that we have at our disposal. And then you're able to start bringing the things back that you're discarding. So my favorite one of those cards is Dack Fayden. Dack Fayden is going to be getting a video of his own. This is, without a doubt, to me, the best Vanguard they've ever made. It's an absolutely ridiculous card. But the 0 ability is going to make it so that you're discarding a card every turn and then drawing cards and giving them ridiculous amounts of mana. So Dack Fayden is a phenomenal engine for drawing and discarding. You could actually go ahead and, for giggles, use the Royal Scions, which are going to be able to do sort of a similar thing to Dack Fayden in discarding and then drawing, except that Dack Fayden gives them mana, which makes him better, and he costs less mana, which makes him way better. However, this does enable you to give your creatures double strike, which is an absolute blast because it's going to make you shred your opponent's life force. You could go with a card like Surly Badger, which is going to have a lot of effects based on discarding cards. So if you're running a discard wheel effect, you could go ahead and run the Surly Badger. Or I said Badger, it's a Badgersaur. What am I doing? You could run the tried and true Angie Falconwrath with Subira to get some pretty good spanking going on your opponent. Which, you know, I'm sure that some people like that particular combo, because it's very, very strong. Or finally, you could use nonsense like Song of Creation to get crazy cards in your hand, dump them in the graveyard, and then use things like Valakut Awakening for wheel effects. So there's a lot of ways that you can build around with discard. If you're going to go the discard route, you are going to want to run some cards that enable you to get things back from your graveyard. So you can just type graveyard into the filter on the bottom to look at what enables you to bring things back from the graveyard. My favorite cards to use for the graveyard option are Kess, Dissident Mage, which is going to make it so that you can use Lukka's first ability to discard spells, and then Kess is going to give you those spells back every turn for free. So you can just discard things like Chromanticore or Ruinous Ultimatum or Magnus Opus, or really just any kind of really high-cost red spell that does terrible things, and you get to bring them back for free. I know, iTunes keeps jumping up. There's this thing where if I'm recording with my phone on my computer, like for some reason, like every few seconds it feels like it tries to open up iTunes and then update my phone, which is updated, so I don't know. Anywho, the other card that I really love for this particular scenario is the Efreet Flame Painter that I mentioned earlier. I do think that this is better than Kess for this because you're going to be getting 2 cards, and also it has double strike, and also it has Berserker. So this card is absolutely phenomenal because it's going to get rid of your opponent's creatures, and if it dies, you just bring it back with Lukka's second. So this is an absolutely phenomenal option. So those are the routes that I would personally go for deck building. In this video, what you're going to be seeing is you're going to be seeing gameplay of me running a Lorehold deck, where I built a deck that really used a lot of the uncommons and some of the rares from the Lorehold school, so that you could see some of those in action and you could see how Lukka is going to play with some of the Strixhaven cards. I played an Exile themed deck with the hopes of trying to make the third ability stronger. And then finally, for the third match, you're just going to see a power deck that uses the discard engine and Lukka's high red mana bonus. So let's go ahead and get into the gameplay. Alright, so this first match is going to be my Lorehold deck. Right, so that's going to be the one that's based on the white-red school, and then just trying to get things into the graveyard, trying to get things coming back from the graveyard, all of that goodness. So my starting hand here, I've got both Valakut Awakening and I've got Illuminate History. Those are both my wheel effect cards, so it's a little bit unfortunate that I've got my wheelers here, but it's not the worst thing in the world. So I do have the Quintorius Field Researcher, or whatever that Loxodon is called, Elephant, whatever you want to call it. In the Magic world, they're Loxodons, all right? So here I don't actively want to discard any of the things in my hand, which is why I haven't used my first ability here. The Dwarven Mine has a lot of mana, and so at this point I am actually going to go ahead and use the first ability, just because I really needed to get some enhanced gems, because you'll notice that Illuminate History was in my starting hand. I'll be making a separate video on enhanced gems, but if you have an enhanced gem, or if you have a card with enhancement on it that starts in your hand, not that it's the first card you draw, but if it's one of the first 2 cards that the game generates for your hand, it does not generate enhanced gems for that card. So it just sort of sits there idly in your hand. And so I was not able to actually do anything with the card here at the beginning because I needed to try and get the enhancements on it to be able to get the tokens. Now, here this is absolutely terrible. My opponent plays Velomachus, which is just one of the strongest cards in the game. This dragon is absolutely insane. It's in the vault actually right now at the time of my recording this video. So if you're watching this video while Velomachus is in the vault, I strongly suggest that you pick Velomachus up. And so my goal here is really just to try and deal some damage to Velomachus, and then while dealing the damage to Velomachus, get just a few more of those sweet enhancements. Try and draw some cards when I use the Illuminate history, and ideally get one more thing in my hand that's going to be enabling me to burn my opponent. Because if I'm able to burn my opponent, then ideally I can try and destroy the Velomachus. Now you'll notice that I didn't take the red to black match on the bottom left of the screen, which would have given me a bunch of enhancements, and I didn't do that because if any kind of gem destruction or cascade destroys an enhanced gem, you actually don't get the enhancement on your enhanced card. And so I did want to try and get as many enhancements as I could on that Illuminate history. And so just if you were wondering why I didn't make that play right there, that is why I didn't make that play right there. However, it is also going to be worth an absolute ton of mana because you've got +6 for red. You've also got +3 for the black. But I do want to preserve some of those black gems there. So I'm going to go ahead and use Illuminate History. And here's where you're going to see those spirit tokens come out. And you'll see that those spirit tokens can actually get pretty big pretty fast. So not only am I wheeling my hand, but I'm getting a 2012 on the battlefield with Defender, which is a very solid body. And of course, my opponent bought the Dragon Bundle, did not just get Velomachus. And so now I've got to deal with the Silver Quill Dragon as well. So I'm not running any big kid cards in this deck, and I'm going up against some of the biggest kid cards in Standard to boot. So this is a little bit scary. Now I do have that 2012, so my creature is going to be hitting harder than my opponent's creatures will be for now. However, the Silver Quill Dragon is going to be making Inklings that do terrible things to my life. So I do not like that. However, I do have the Venerable War Singer here as my feed decides to get super choppy. That actually wasn't the original recording feed. It's just my my recording software on my computer. So the original recording was spotless, pristine, beautiful. Anywho, I do have Burn in my hand, so I've got 2 Creative Outbursts, which is fantastic. If I can actually get both of those Creative Outbursts out, then I'll be able to destroy my opponent's Silver Quill Dragon. Here I'm using my second ability to bring a Loxodon back from the graveyard, and so here's where you're going to get your first view of that second ability bringing a creature back that I have on the battlefield already, so I will not actually be losing the reinforcement. So at the beginning of my next turn, take a look. If the Loxodon makes it to my next turn without Daxos destroying it, you will see exactly what I mean here. Now here I was just trying to figure out if there was any way that I could make a 5-match, or what would be the way that would make it so that I'd have the most advantageous potential cascade given the situation. And so I ultimately decided to go for that match hoping for a cascade, but also knowing that the Creative Outburst is, I think, going to destroy red gems. Unless, is that the other one? No, it's the other one. Okay, no, I was thinking of something else. But nonetheless, it does get the Silver Quill Dragon pretty low. So it is probably going to die. Unfortunately, Daxos does play the Mythos there, so we don't get to see the Loxodon prevail, but just it does prevail. It does. So, well, I mean, not my Loxodon, right? My Loxodon just failed at life, but, you know, other Loxodons that are better at life do not fail. So here I've got a 5-match into an enhanced gem, so that's going to be pretty perfect. I'm definitely going to be taking that. I'm going to use Lucas first just to see if I can generate anything else, try and make it so that I can kill my opponent this turn. As if I can kill my opponent this turn, that would be ideal. All right, I'll be up there in a minute, kiddo. Jacob, I'll be up there in a minute. What we just heard there is my son telling me, come upstairs and read me my nighttime story, is basically the general gist of that. So we can leave him in. I love that guy. So I obviously don't make the world's best match there, which, you know, happens. Oh no. And Daxos is able to play more critters, but at the end of the day, it doesn't make too much of a difference. I have too much power on the battlefield for Daxos. And so here you'll see that this deck of just sort of gimmicky shenanigans cards was able to overcome some of the strongest cards in Standard. And so you're going to find that you will be able to make fairly competitive decks using this Planeswalker and trying to capitalize on the abilities of the Walker and the set in the event that you wanted to try and make something work with the Lorehold Guild. So I knew that I already had the match won, but I did want to try and make as many of these spirit tokens as I could. Getting 35 power in those spirit tokens was just fine, and that's going to be the end of the first match with the Lorehold School. Match number 2 is going to be my Exile deck. So I've got both Tectonic Giant and Fireflux Squad in my starting hand, which is pretty sweet. I obviously want the Giant first, just because that's going to enable me to get a little bit more card draw, and I absolutely want the card draw. And then, of course, to start being able to exile things. So we've gotten to take a little bit of a look at what Lukka's first and second abilities are like. And so in this match, I'm really trying to focus a little bit more on Lukka's third ability. Now, I like to always charge my removal first. Charging your removal is generally a pretty great way to not lose matches, because then if your opponent plays something, you're able to react to it. So I'm just charging my removal there. Now, here for matches, as I don't have any like great matches for myself, I am going for a little bit of loyalty here. And of course, I do wind up getting lucky, and I'm able to get not only a 5 match, but I'm able to just get a ton of mana here. So that's pretty great for me. Now, I also have the Fireflux Squad. I don't actively want to exile my Giant just yet. I'd like it to do some really good things. I'm tempted to take the loyalty match going down into green, but I know that that is not the way. And so here I do actually, I didn't want to get rid of the Giant, but I was like, you know what? The Giant doesn't have haste. And so if I get rid of it, I get something with haste. So I get my Paco here, and Paco is going to start exiling things. And it's going to have haste, so I'm just going to be able to start doing damage straight away. And so that's worked itself out pretty well too. Now you'll see that in this deck, I don't actually have a way of really taking advantage of Paco's companion ability. But that's okay. That's really not the end of the world here. We're really just using Paco for the Exile. If you're playing a version of this deck, you probably are going to want to make sure that you are taking advantage of that Exile. So here I'm using the third ability, and you'll see that I do 1 damage. Now, I've only exiled the Giant, so it's not like I've really had a great opportunity to start dumping and exiling things. But if I were to use the ability again, right, if I wanted it to be more powerful than the rank 2 version of the ability, then for my next usage of the ability, I would need to do 15 damage just to tie the rank 2 version for effectiveness. So yeah, it's this is the only ability in the game that I can think of where ranking it up actually makes it worse, which is kind of odd. Now, my opponent gets a Quartzwood Crasher here down, which is just absolutely terrifying, because I'm only going to be able to do 10 damage to both the Quartzwood and the token here with my Shatterskull Smashing. So you're going to see that comes down, and then at this stage, I'm just like, well, this is fantastic. So what should I do? Right? Because Quartzwood Crasher, if it keeps hitting me, is going to do absolutely horrible things to me. So I do actually wind up getting pretty lucky. I did charge up enough mana for Mila, and so I say lucky, but it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? So here you're going to get to see the third ability in action with Mila. Mila's going to make the Quartzwood Crasher hit my Fireflux Squad, which is all honky-dory and great, but then it still has that trample damage come through, and so it's still going to go ahead and make that Evil Beast token. I can't use Transmogrify on my opponent's creature here, because if I do, they're probably just going to get another Quartzwood Crasher down, which I obviously don't want. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring back my Fireflux Squad. I was bringing it back hoping that I'd be able to get enough mana with a match with the double white match on the left to be able to get rid of the opponent's critter. And so by destroying Kalemni's token, it is actually enough for the Fireflux Squad to come on in and destroy the beast token if I want. But Nonetheless, I've got things pretty well in hand. I know that Mila is going to make it so that the beast is just going to swing into Paco and kill itself. So I might as well have sacrificed the Fireflux squad just to keep getting more things into Exile. Remember, my goal for this match is to try and make Lukka's third do a bunch of damage by making an Exile-based deck. Now, of course, Quartzwood Crasher is absolutely terrifying. This is not what I want to see right here. And so I've really now at this point just got to beat down my opponent before my opponent's able to kill me with Quartzwood, because it's just such a strong card. So fortunately, I do have Mila though still, right? It's so easy to forget about Mila. But we've got Mila. Mila's going to make it so that the Quartzwood is just going to swing in. Here I am going to use my Vanguard to make the Satyr tokens, or Satyr, whatever it is. And so you are going to see me use the Fireflux squad here to exile those tokens to get another creature on the battlefield. And one of the really nice things about doing that is it's going to give the creature that I get haste. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to replace the Satyr tokens. No, I don't want to replace them just yet, right? Because I do want the Fireflux squad to get rid of those tokens. So I'm going to use them to get rid of the tokens to get a free giant. It just means that I've got a second free Jolly Red Giant next turn, which is good. I like Jolly Red Giants. And so you'll see here that Calamity is at 9 health, right? 9 health. So I'm thinking, all right, I can try and kill Calamity here. And so remember, the ability does damage. The third ability does damage based on exiling also. So I'm going to exile the 2. And then I get pretty lucky. I'm able to get a Tectonic Giant here for exiling from the Furious Rise that I have on the battlefield. So I'm going to go ahead, exile another Tectonic Giant. And so now here, I don't have enough loyalty on my Vanguard, or I should say shields on my Vanguard, to be able to use the minus ability, which is unfortunate. So I'm going to go ahead and use Crafty Companion here. I'm going to go ahead and invoke for Lukka, and you'll see that I hit for 7, which is just not a whole lot. But my creatures are still going to be enough to be able to take out Calamity. So that's really more of an exhibition of making a deck that's built around Exile and the third ability. And so it was just to give you an idea of what that's going to look like in action. Let's take a look at a Big Kid deck. My Big Kid deck here is nasty. It is not nice. So it's running some of my discard outlets with the Lorehold Dragon, Velomachus, along with the Efreet, to be able to bring spells back from my graveyard and just get as much recursion going as possible. Now I get insanely lucky. I've got 2 copies of Dak Faden here. So if you haven't seen what Dak Faden looks like in action, you're going to get to see a heck of a lot of what he's able to do for you in this match. So I'm able to drop both of the Daks here, which means that I'm going to be able to just start spamming the +0 ability to draw 2 cards with 12 mana each per turn, because it's going to give those cards mana equal to the shield count. Now, I get my Mox Ruby, which is pretty perfect. I also get a Magnus Opus, which I will be able to cast this turn. However, unfortunately, my opponent's creature has 8 toughness, and the Opus is only going to do 6 to it. But that's really not too big of a deal, because I am going to draw 2 cards with half mana for doing this. I do not want to use Dak Faden's Magecraft here. I almost never use it, because if you take your opponent's creature when you're trying to kill it, you then don't kill it. Your ability fizzles. So I would much rather start pinging down my opponent's creatures and getting the art tokens. Now, at this stage, I really do want to get Velomachus down, but I also want to see what else the game offers me. And, of course, the game offers me 2 more Velomachuses. So I'm going to toss the Chromanticore here. I'm going to use my Mox to be able to get free mana to Ruinous Ultimatum. And I'm going to use my first ability to discard a creature, just because I knew that I had the 2 Velomachuses and the Illuna in my hand. I just wanted to buff them up a little bit more, because the more that you buff Velomachus up, the more you're going to be getting out of Velomachus. You'll notice that I'm not actually casting the Velomachus first here, just because there's really nothing that it's going to accomplish for me, given that my opponent has a 6-power Double Striker. So that's definitely not going to be able to stop my opponent's creature. But I'm not too worried about that. No. I'm going to go ahead, toss a Dak Faden here, just because I've already got the 2 Daks, and honestly, that's really enough for really anything that you're going to need. And so now here I'm just going to go ahead and try and play both Velomachus and the Efreet, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to get enough to mutate Velomachus here. Unfortunately, the card I get from it is another Mox Ruby. I say that's unfortunate just because I didn't need it there, but, you know, I mean, complaining about getting a Mox Ruby is kind of funny, right? So at this stage, there's really not a lot that Bolas can do, because if my opponent kills Velomachus, it's really not a big deal because the Efreet is going to be getting me stuff, and then I'm just getting so much free stuff from Deckbuilding also that this is game over. There's nothing my opponent can do here. So at this stage, I just want to try and get as much mana as I can. Try and get Chromanticore on something. Usually I like to put it on the Efreet. It really depends. Sometimes I like it on Velomachus just to make sure that I'm able to cast just anything from my deck. So for example, here by putting it on Velomachus, with Velomachus coming up to 23 power, it means that I'm going to be able to just freely take Ruinous Ultimatums if I want. However, in this particular case, I do want to take a Magnus Opus from my graveyard from the Efreet. And for some reason, Bolas isn't killing my creatures with his first ability, which is a massive mistake. It doesn't really matter, right? If you look at my hand, you'll see that I've got the Velomachus in hand. And so it would just come back anyways. So here I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to use Lukka's first just to buff the creatures in my hand. And then I'm going to go ahead and use Deckbuilding's 0 to go ahead and draw some more cards with mana. So here comes Dax 0. As I mentioned, it's going to be an absolute showcase of Dax abilities here too. And so I'm going to be able to drop down 2 Efreets. I'm going to be able to drop down Velomachus, and I'm going to be able to use a Magnum Opus. And that really should be the match. I don't see Bolas being able to take it. It's just too much damage, especially since one of the Efreets was buffed. So the Magnus Opus is going to be swinging in for 12. It's going to make another Art Elemental token. It's going to draw me 2 cards with half mana. And, I mean, why not get free Ruinous Ultimatum and another Opus? But it doesn't matter. Velomachus is going to kill here. So, as you can see, I'm just getting more and more, and my opponent is dead. So, that was my final Lukka match for you guys. My super powerful one. So, in conclusion about Lukka Wayward Bonder. Where does Lukka lie on my tier list? How do I feel like Lukka compares to the massive amount of other mono-red planeswalkers, etc., etc.? So, firstly, I feel like Lukka's abilities are at about the strength of an Origins planeswalker, which means that Lukka's base tier for my list is somewhere in the C to D range. None of the 3 abilities stand out as particularly powerful abilities. There's definitely uses for all 3 of them, and so as it is, all 3 abilities are decent abilities, but none of them are necessarily great abilities, and none of them are even necessarily like solidly good abilities, right? I mean, all 3 of Koth's abilities overshadow all of these abilities, and there are situations where I would rather even use Chandra Origins' abilities over any of these 3 abilities also. The thing that Lukka Wayward Bonder really has going for him is the +6 red mana bonus. And the +3 to both black and white are both pretty solid also, but that +6 to red is pretty fantastic, especially with all of the land forming and the gem conversion that we have at our disposal right now. That said, it just brings me right back to Koth again, where Koth is going to be able to get more out of the red mana bonus than Lukka will. So, as things go, I think that this one is one of the weaker planeswalkers that's come into the game since I've started doing my content creation, which is definitely painful to say. I hate to say it, but it's about where Wayward Bonder is. I've put in a lot of hours into Lukka, and I've been able to make a lot of interesting decks, but I didn't really feel like any of the decks that I made were good because of Lukka. I felt like they were good because of the other cards that I was putting in the deck. So, those are my general thoughts on the Planeswalker. I hope that you found this informative and helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.